Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I got to tell you, people, I'm very excited to have this gentleman on my show today. I interviewed him around 6 years ago, and then I remember I went through some health issues, and he called me to see he was playing with Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets at the Met in Philadelphia, and I had to wear a pocket defibrillator, and when I was walking through the gate, they had to make me walk around, and it was a pain in the ass, but I got to see a great show. I met him after the show, and you know him from Spandau Ballet, but he has a great solo album that just came out. It's his third, I believe. It's called This Destination, and my guest is Gary Kemp. How you doing, Gary?
Good, mate. Thank you. Nice to have you. Thank you for having me on. You know, I'm so used to doing a podcast myself that I nearly said nice to have you on.
Well, no, I know. I listened to your podcast. It's funny because we get some of the same guests. But I want to talk about the album, and it's a great album. But before we start talking about the videos and the songs, my favorite song on the album is "Work." I want to hear. Tell me about the song "Work."
Okay, there's a couple of things here. So, first of all, let me tell you how I began writing that, and that was I was just having a little bit of. Couldn't find my way into writing for a few days. And there's an artist over here, called Richard Hawley. He's a solo artist, and he's very successful here. He's had a musical on. He's had he makes great solo albums, quite Americana style. And he just called me out of the blue, and he said, "What are you up to?" I said, "I'm trying to write a song." He's got this great baritone voice, and he just said, "All right," he said. Are you writing it on piano or you're writing it on guitar? I said, "I'm writing it on piano." He goes, "Right, go to the piano." "Okay, close your eyes," he said. "Now put your hands above the piano. I'm going to go now and you're going to write a fucking brilliant song." Anyway, I started writing this song, which was really a homage to my parents. I struggle with this idea of, am I worthy? Do I live up to the kind of commitment that my folks made to parenthood and to putting food on the table? And they were really working class people. My dad was a printer in a factory. He took me to work years and years ago when I was a very small kid. And the noise was incredible in this small rooms, and the smell of ink. And he opened his locker and he put on his brown overall, and I was like, wow, it's a cape for Superman. And what I didn't know is that at that time he was struggling, and he ended up having a nervous breakdown. So I write this song, and it begins with him and my admiration for him, and then my mum as well, who worked very hard. And then how do I compete is the third verse, as it were. Am I man enough? Am I doing a good job as a husband? Am I doing a good job as a parent? And these things bring us anxiety, and I've tried to take the tools that they gave me to make it work. And I think it became this dual idea of work as a thing we all do, to put food on the table and to make our lives, interesting and successful, and work as in trying to work it out, just trying to work these things out, therapeutically, as we go through our lives and we criticize ourselves.
Now, when you wrote it, though, okay, you closed your eyes, you put your hands above the piano. What comes out first, the music or the lyrics, or you do it in synchronicity? Because every songwriter is different. I mean, when you sat down, did you already have an idea about your parents? So when you sat down, did it just... You start playing, that's my worst impression of playing the piano, but you start playing, did the words just pop out, or did you have to lay down the track first and then work?
No, I never lay down a track. I never write with a track. I don't write with a computer. I write with, acoustic instruments, and I try and finish the song completely before I go into the studio to start, layering up instruments with it. So, I think every song's different. On that particular song, yes, I did know I wanted to write a song about them, and that puts you in a particular mood. You're feeling, is it melancholia? Is it nostalgia? Is it whimsy? All these different moods that you're associating with a story that you want to represent. When you then have to just trust your musical experience to fall into that groove that represents the lyrics. I mean, so much more now when I was with Spandau Ballet, I would write tunes first because it was all about the melody. It was all about, getting the hook. Then what did I have to write about? Well, when I was writing for them, I was a man in his 20s. I didn't have enough experience in life. You've not failed by the time when you're writing. Most people who write hit songs that we love, who wrote hit songs that we love, were young and had no failure, so it's very hard to draw on any experience. Now, as I get older, it's something that is, I have a well of experience and a well of failures. So, the marriage goes wrong or, health or whatever it might be, you've got things to draw on. So anyway, for me, it tends to be more lyric first now. Some songs, there's a track on the album that opens the album called Borough Town. That was all written, all lyrically first. I didn't even know what that melody was for about 2 years.
Well, and the Put Your Head Up is a really catchy track. Like that, the chorus sticks in your head. There's certain songs you hear it and choruses stick with you. Like I was walking out the door because I record a business podcast and I was going to the studio and I just listened to it. And the whole car I'm driving in my car, that chorus was stuck in my head. When you write, I mean, I always wonder, when do you decide what the chorus is going to be? When do you decide, I mean, how do you put that together? I'm sure it's different all the time, but do you sit there? Is it frustrating sometimes when you go, God, I have this whole song, but I don't have the fucking right thing to people to catch on to it?
It's gut. It's just gut feeling. You just think, what do I want to hear? I'm a fan, right? I'm a fan of music. So I start writing a song and I think, where do I want this to go? If I was listening, and you just have to follow your gut. Sometimes it doesn't work and you reach a dead end and then you go back to the beginning again and you just start again, and then before you know it, there's something subconscious, you're being led subconsciously by something that just says this way. And I'm immersed in music, Steve, so all of us have a jumble of music in our heads, whether it's from the Beatles or the Stones or Costello or just name it, or even Bach, and our brain is just pulling at all those little bits and rummaging through the dressing up box of sound that we've all got in our heads and subconsciously just pulling bits out at different times. That's the AI going on in our heads, isn't it, really?
Well, no, AI, you used AI for your video, for the title track. So, I mean, it must have been different because back with Spandau, like that was the age of videos. Like I'm an MTV guy. That was like, boom, you watch the videos and everything. So now videos are much easier to make. I mean, why did you decide to go that route and just not, because you have some things on your website of you in black and white playing the guitar. Why did you decide to go with this for that video?
So I'd done 3 AI videos for the album as well. One for I Know Where I'm Going, one for Take the Wheel, which hasn't come out yet, and then one for This Destination. There's a guy called Stephen Wilson. I don't know whether he's been on your show. He's a great prog musician over here. He remixes all the bands like Yes and Jethro Tull, and he's incredible. He done my Atmos mix sound for this album. He'd used a guy called Mike Benyon based in America for a bit of AI video that he did. I thought it was really interesting, and my record company wasn't going to give me money to do a big lush video, of course. So I can do some behind the scenes stuff, but I'd already done that on Put Your Head Up. So I just thought, let's see what we can find, putting these lyrics into the machine and developing this. And this guy came up with this, and we tweaked it along the way. Some videos that I think really were evocative and suited the song, got the song up on YouTube in a way that's much better than a lyric video or more of me doing backstage stuff. And I think it's really enhanced the music. But I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with AI visuals. We've all enjoyed animated visuals. Eno, years and years ago, I remember in Eno's diaries talking about, making visuals with computers, having software that made visuals based on the sound that was going in. Where I would have a problem is if AI writing lyrics or music, and I think most humans would have a problem with that because we listen to art and we read novels, we listen to songs, we concentrate on the lyrics because we don't want to feel that we're alone in the world. And we pick up on things that tell us that say, hey, man, I'm the same as you. I've got the same feelings as you. I've got the same frustrations. I can see the street the same way you see it, but I can encapsulate it in this lyric. Well, if it's a machine doing that, you're still going to feel alone. So I don't think anyone's interested.
Well, I think that's also, I know a lot of TV writers. It's the same thing. You can write you can't create a Tony Soprano off AI. You can write a script. It's going to be a shitty script because it's not going to be hard. You're not going to get good characters. So I think, a lot of people get worried about AI in the entertainment business, but I always think the talent for, as you say, what you feel an emotion, you can't get that off AI.
No, and I don't think you respect it when you're a customer of art. I don't think you have an interest in it. But I do think the visual thing is different, because I think that can take you places that are really, fantastical and interesting. And someone said to me, "Oh, you put a bunch of people out of work by making an AI video." And I said, "No, I didn't. I wouldn't have given anyone a job, and now I've given one guy a job at least."
So what made you decide to do this album? You're a busy guy, you toured with Nick Mason, you have the podcast. So at what point do you sit there and say, okay, I'm going to put another solo album out? Because you've had a very successful career. And a lot of times people tend to rest on their laurels. But what made you decide to put this out?
Because I think I waited a long time between my first album and my second solo album. I waited a very long time. And a lot of things just got in my way. Life, Spandau Ballet, getting reunions of those guys, twice. And looking after that catalogue. And then a few years ago, I put out in solo, and I really realized at that time that writing is what I do. And I don't have to worry about saving songs for when Spandau Ballet get back together. And if I'm writing this kind of lyrics and these kinds of songs, there's only one person who can sing that, and that's me, because these are about me. So after doing in solo, I did want to write another album, but I ended up going on tour for 6 months with Nick Mason, and we played 32 different countries. I don't think that was as healthy as I would have. Really, for me at my age, I found that not tiring. I found that psychologically quite terrifying, all that traveling. And I missed my family. I got back and I was feeling really anxious and I couldn't settle. And, I think that might have something to do with my age. It might have something to do with the fact that, we spoke about my parents earlier. 15 years ago, they died within 4 days of each other, and I never really mourned that. I'd suppressed it. Whatever it was, I wasn't in a good space. Now, my answer to that, my doctor is my music and my writing. So that's driving me back into the piano room, into picking up the guitar, into trying to write songs to solve the issues that I'm feeling. So you mentioned Put Your Head Up. That begins, my feet are dragging, my arms feel weight, I'm tripping on stones, and that's how I felt. And then singing Put Your Head Up. It's looking for positivity. Where's my glass half full? So it was within, and songs like Take the Wheel on the album, about that feeling about being out of chaos, and I created a track that is very film noir, because in my head there was a nemesis, and that nemesis was within me. All of this stuff feeds your writing. And when you finish that song, you feel empowered. You feel like you've had the best day at the therapist ever. But what I hope, Steve, is that they're not just personal. I hope that they're universal.
Well, now, did you ever think back, like as you said earlier, when you wrote, It's True and all that for Spandau Ballet, as a young man, did you ever think, and this is an odd question, but did you ever think that at this point in your life you'd still be creating and your writing style would change so much? Because as you said, now it's so much personal. I mean, like I do stand-up comedy. I was out of the business for a long time. I'm back in it. What I do now on stage is completely different than what I did when I was 24, 25, 26. Because as you said, we've gone through the shit. We've gone through marriages. I've gone some health issues. I just got married again 5 years ago. My wife is wonderful. She doesn't get offended if I make a joke about her. So, like, as a young man, I mean, did you ever think that you would evolve so much as a songwriter and an artist?
Listen, you never think anything. You don't. I don't think we thought that far ahead. Even when we were in Spandau Ballet, you only thought as far ahead as getting the next single to be successful, or in our case, in England, getting on Top of the Pops, which is our music program here, or getting K-Rock to play your record, or getting on MTV. You're only thinking as far as that. I mean, if you go back to the 80s, longevity in bands was not that far. I mean, I think I'm in my 20s then, so Jagger's approaching 40 at that time in the 80s. So's McCartney approaching 40. There's no older guys than that in rock music. No older guys in music. And what did the older generation do at that point? What did guys in their 50s do when we were living the 80s? I guess they were listening to like Sinatra still, or jazz or something. But maybe even Steely Dan was even the guys from Steely Dan must have been in their 30s and 40s then. So I don't think any of us thought ahead into the future. We never knew that social media would come and change the landscape of how people listen to music. We never knew that venues would fall to the side because people meet online and don't need to meet in a place. So much we didn't know or understand. I mean, we wouldn't have even understood about the streaming world back in the 80s. So it was utterly impossible to imagine. And I think you just got to roll with the punches as a songwriter. If streaming's happening, then go with that. If social media is happening, how can I use that to curate my ideas?
Now, you mentioned Top of the Pops. Tell me about your first appearance on that, because I hear stories how it was like here with the Tonight Show, with Carson. If a comedian did the Tonight Show with Johnny, the next day they're booked for a year. They're with William Morris. Everything changes. How big was it for you to get Top of the Pops, and what was that first appearance like?
I mean, we're not a big country, Britain, but you'd have 16 million people watching that on a Thursday night. That was so huge. That was one of the biggest TV shows. So your grandma knew what was number one, right? It was water cooler television, if you like. I watched it as a kid, and when I'm 11, I had written 2 songs which I performed at my junior school, and this guy who was a bishop of Stepney, he was there handing out the prizes. He heard me sing these songs. He comes to my house with a cassette recorder in 1971, and my parents are there, and he goes, I'm giving this cassette recorder to Gary. I want him to record every song he ever writes and send it to me because I think he's got a real talent. And as he gave it to me and said those words, I remember Rod Stewart was singing Maggie May on Top of the Pops. Top of the Pops was already a key moment in my life. The first time I fell in love with a musician properly was David Bowie on Top of the Pops doing Starman. He points down the lens of the camera and he says, I had to phone someone, so I picked on you. And it was me and thousands of other kids, right? T-Rex, watching Mark Bolan on Top of the Pops. Seminal moments that my generation will never forget. So your ambition is to get there, and you get there, and I got there in 1980, and you wanted it to be seminal, your appearance as well, so you think a lot about what you're going to wear and how you're going to be very different from everyone else. But there are all these other bands on at the same time, right? So there are about 6, 7, 8 other bands on, and some are from the old days. I can't remember who was on our show. I should look that up, actually. Or someone should look it up for me. And you're in a dressing room. Next door you might have Status Quo, or you might have Joy Division. Well, maybe not Joy Division, but you'd have someone else. The Smiths or something, and then you would it'd be your turn, and you'd go onto the stage, and you'd be miming to your track. But the Musicians Union didn't like you miming to tracks because, in their mind, you'd probably use session musicians. So they needed you to re-record everything before you went on that show. It was a Musicians Union rule. But nobody did that. So everyone went to a studio. before Top of the Pops, 2 days before, pretended to record their song while a guy from the Musicians Union sat in the studio who probably knew you weren't doing it properly. Or you did a cokey version. But, these are songs that you've spent weeks trying to record, right? You're not going to be able to do it in 3 hours. And then at the end, you'd swap the tapes. You'd give the tape to the BBC guy that you really wanted a mime to, which is the original single. Anyway, so Top of the Pops was like that. They'd have a Radio 1 DJ on there. If you want to go on YouTube, you can see most of them. You can't see the ones that were DJ'd by Jimmy Savile because he got busted and for being, malevolent, and all his stuff I think has been taken down. But fortunately, Spandau Ballet never did a Top of the Pops with Jimmy Savile presenting.
So I follow you on Instagram. And I really enjoy your segments where, you go to Trident Studios. And then just tell me about what that was. Tell me about the early days, because I see that, and then you talk about Lake Kilt and the Roxy. And I always think of the Roxy in L.A. When I lived in L.A., you think of the Roxy. But tell me about what those early days were for you starting out, because what made you decide to be a musician? I mean, your father was a working class, and you saw it on TV. But what actually made you start a band, and how did you get into that scene?
My parents bought me a guitar for Christmas once, and a book by Burt Whedon, Playing a Day, and I learned 4 chords, and I think it was If I Had a Hammer, and I just thought I really like these chords, but I hate this tune, and I wrote my own tune and my own lyrics, and from then on I just wrote songs. And so I was always in bands. When I was 14, I was playing in a band with guys who were nearly 30 years old, and we were playing pubs, and we were doing mixed. It was kind of that during that pub rock era in England, which is, I guess there was a lot of Americana around at that time. So, it was, the Eagles were popular, Steely Dan was popular, Little Feat were popular. So that was the kind of music that I ended up playing with these older guys. And then punk came along, and I saw punk, and I went, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to be in this band anymore. And Steve Norman and I, a friend of mine who'd seen the Sex Pistols with me, formed what became eventually Spandau Ballet. We formed it at school when we were 16. And we did a few punk shows, but we were a bit young, to be honest. And it wasn't until 1978 when a really cool little Tuesday night in a bar in London called the Blitz was taken over by these 2 guys, Steve Strange and Rusty Egan, young guys who were one straight, one gay, really amazing, like dressers, Bowie obsessives, were playing sort of records mostly from Germany that were validated by Bowie, Kraftwerk, people like that, La Dusseldorf. And we realized that was where we wanted to be, and we got the synthesizer, and I wrote the whole of what became the first album, and we christened ourselves Spandau Ballet. But I think what you're referring to is me walking around and to these places that are very local to me in Soho and Covent Garden in London, and I'm looking for the ghosts. Steve, there's a song on my new album called Windswept Street, which is about that very thing. It's there were people who changed my life, and we would be in Soho was a very different place then. It was like, I guess it's like, I know, East Village or somewhere. It was really rough and dark and seedy, and some nightclubs, and you'd have to be, you'd have to avoid the skinheads and the punks, and we were kids in makeup, and we were dressing flamboyantly, and Bowie was our kind of god, and I go back to, on my Instagram page, I take a walk back to some of those key places, like the Studio Trident, where Ziggy Stardust was recorded, and where we did our first album, and or clubs like the Blitz, or clubs like that came after that, the Kilt you mentioned, and talk about the magic of those places, how venue was so tied up with youth culture. And I'm sure it was the same in America as well. But, it was, you can trace in about a handful of venues the timeline from 1957 with the beginning of rock and roll in England with the Shadows. And you can trace every movement, through the Railway Tavern with the Rolling Stones, or Eel Pie Island with the Who, or the Roxy with punk, or before then the UFO Club with Pink Floyd and psychedelia, Middle Earth Club with glam rock, and there was always a place and a band and a youth movement, and we were kind of just taking the baton from what had come before us and claiming our stake.
So what was
Sorry,
it?
I talk a lot, Steve. I'm sorry, man.
What's that?
I talk a lot.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's what I like to hear. You're on because I like stories. I'm just a guy who listens to good stories. Now, I want to talk to you. Well, first of all, the song "True." It's so funny. Whenever I hear that song, actually, I got married 5.5 years ago. We played it at our wedding, and it takes me back to when I was in college, and you went from college and you go down the Jersey Shore. You go to the bars. And when that song played, you always know you eyed up which girl you liked or the girl you wanted to dance with. Because it had an air of sex appeal. And that's so weird. Like, it's like when you hear Roxy music, like Avalon. That song, I want to know, what was your process in writing that? And of course you didn't know it'd be so long lasting. But how did you end up putting the sax in? Because the sax just nails it. And I put it on Facebook before, like, great sax solos. And boom, and it's funny, because Steve Norman replied to something Nick Richards had wrote on my page. And I was like, wow, he's the guy who played the sax. But tell me about the making of that song, because for me, it was, I got laid a lot off that song. I'm going to be honest. I got a lot of action off that song.
I'm a young man. I'm bursting with love. I'm 22 years old when I write that song. I've been working with Spandau for 2 albums before then, and we'd gone through different sort of metamorphosis with starting with electronic music and then going into the funk of Chant Number 1, and I just really wanted to write a proper soul song, and because I'd loved Al Green, I loved Marvin Gaye, I wanted to write a song like that really, and Isley Brothers and I thought that Tony had the chops to be able to sing it, and I was having a kind of unrequited relationship with someone that was totally platonic. She was a writer, she was a creative person, a singer, and we were swapping little gifts. And she gave me this gift of Nabokov's Lolita, which I read, and there were a couple of lines in there that really jumped out at me. I think he says "seaside limbs" at one point, and I went, "Oh, seaside limbs, seaside arms." And there was something like "with a thrill in my head and a pill on my tongue." That was also kind of in there, and I adapted it. So I was already thinking about writing this song for her, but I couldn't mention her name, of course. Why do I find it hard to write the next line when I want the truth to be said? Oh my God, this is me. This is a song about me writing a song, but not being able to be honest. But I think musically it was in the groove of those Motown records or the Al Green records. That was what was the template, I think, in my head as a writer. It was another thing that pushed me into writing that song, or at least getting that hook. That hook came from one afternoon. I already had the tune of "True," but I didn't have that bit. And I'm watching the Let It Be documentary that recently came out again as the Get Back documentary. So it was on TV here in England in about 1982, and I'm watching that. And I'm not really a Beatles aficionado at that point. And John Lennon, there's a bit on it where John Lennon sings "Dig a Pony," and he goes, yeah, dig a pony. And I just think, wow, I love the way he takes that word "I" and snakes it. So there I am. Hey, I know this, and I wanted to do something like that, but it wasn't, I think I've avoided plagiarism. I changed it enough for it not to be the same.
Now, when did you incorporate...
The sax solo, that was a sax solo, right? So I knew Steve Norman. Steve Norman had just recently picked up the sax. He just started learning it. He was really good at it. So now I'm thinking, right, we're going to have a sax solo in here. I think, not only does Steve play a great sax solo, sure, but he has a great platform because it changes key in the song for the sax solo. It goes into a completely different key. I think it goes from G to E flat. And when it hits the E flat, he starts playing a saxophone solo. When it finishes the saxophone solo, it goes back down to G. And so it elevates out of the track. And I think, that is one of the keys to the song's to the thrills that are within the song.
Now, how hard was it for you? You guys are blowing up. You're huge. Okay, Spandau Ballet, women chasing you. Everything's going crazy. You're everywhere. MTV introduced you. But you now still have to, you're doing most of the writing. How hard is that and you're a young guy, so I'm sure you want to live a little bit of the excess. I mean, it's the rock star thing. But when you're the person who is, I hate to say this, but the moneymaker. Because without you writing songs, nothing's getting produced. How hard was that on you, and how did you keep discipline that you could keep producing music and writing?
Yeah, I didn't find it immediately hard. I think I was okay with it. I liked to do the writing, and no one else was doing it, but I felt okay about it. I was coming up with enough ideas, for the Parade album, Only When You Leave, and Highly Strung, and we started to slip a little bit in the States, and I don't know how much that had to do with the record company or not, but we started to build more in Europe. So we became I remember having a drink with John Taylor at one point, and he said, we've got America, you've got Europe. And we did have Europe. We were selling records right across Europe. But I still had to, and I think, I did, right through 87, I'm doing Through the Barricades, which I think was the best song I wrote for Spandau. Not successful in the States, but successful in Europe. Lyrically, much more poignant than anything I'd written before. It's hard. It was hard. It got harder as it went along. As I got towards the end of the 80s, I became to begrudge it. Why am I the only guy doing this? And I don't even get to sing them. It was just a stupid thing to think, really. But I think we were kind of, like all bands, you start to get bored with each other's company. You get silly little things start to niggle you, and before you know it, we're falling out. And 1990, we did fall out. We made our last album, and it wasn't a very comfortable experience in the studio, and I was very dogmatic, and I wanted to walk away at that point. And of course then I ended up getting offered a job in a movie called The Krays with my brother, about the Kray twins, and we said yes, and in a way that was the end of it, really. And it was we weren't going to make another album.
Now, I want to talk to you.
Sorry, I jumped a bit, Steve.
No, no, it's great. I want to talk to you about Christmas time, because you sing on Do They Know It's Christmas? It's not, Do They Know It's Christmas? And every year there's 3 songs that I can listen to a lot over Christmas. It's Springsteen, 'cause I'm from Jersey, Santa Claus Is Coming to Town, King's Father Christmas, and Run DMC's Christmas in Hollis. There are 4 songs that I will listen to over and over because I just love them. How did you end up getting involved with that recording that? Did you know Midge? Did you know Bob? Or how did that come about?
Oh, I mean, I knew all of them. I certainly knew Bob. I'm in an antique store, right? I bought my flat. I'm trying to furnish my flat. I'm in an antique store in the King's Road in London, and I'm in the window pointing out something that I want to see, and walking past the window is Bob Geldof, and he spots me, and he comes into the store, and he said, "Did you see the news last night?" I said, "No." Well, what? He said, "The Michael Burke report on Ethiopia. Did you see it?" And I said, "I didn't." He said, "Look," and he explained it to me, and I'm like, "Wow, yeah, no." And he said, "Do you think we could make a record? If I called Duran and Culture Club, do you think we can make a record?" And I didn't think we could, because I just thought none of us liked each other enough. We were all in too much of competition to let go of our own records and get together in a studio. But I said, "Yeah, why not? Yeah, of course, why not? I've got to go. I'm going to Japan." I said, "I'm on tour." He said, "Well, I'm thinking of calling Midge and see if Midge wants to help me write a song." I said, "Call me in Japan if it happens." So my phone rings while I'm on tour in Japan, and Bob says it's on. I then have to leave Japan to go to Germany to do a TV show, and at this TV show is Duran Duran, and it's the first time we've met up since 1980, when they were just starting out and before they were signed, and of course we decide to all get completely hammered, and have no sleep whatsoever. get on 2 private jets, try and race each other across Europe because we're so competitive. We wanted to land first and get to this studio. And there is everybody. Everybody's there that is in the charts. This is like MTV come alive in front of your face. And the only person who wasn't in the room at that point was Boy George. And Gelder's got him on the phone in New York saying, get your ass over here. And of course, by the end of the evening, Boy George had jumped on Concorde and arrived. So we're all in this studio. And if you look back at the documentary, which is available now, which is basically all the footage of that day shooting, you'll see that it's what made that record was the naivety of working class kids. You just see these ordinary guys thinking, yeah, we can help a continent. Why not? And they were so powerful. We were so powerful because globally we all were making so much money, and we were the most successful groups in the world, probably in that room, that Geldof saw we could tap into that and make proper money to feed people in the third world. It was an amazing. It feels naive, but it worked, and of course then that led to Live Aid. But yeah, amazing to be part of. I remember thinking it was one of the greatest days I'd ever gone through, but mixed feelings because really, we were dealing with people who were suffering. We were doing it for people who were suffering, but I think we were probably getting off on each other's company more.
Now, tell me about Live Aid, because I always love hearing stories. Kenny Jones from The Who told me a story about Live Aid, how, he took a jet, and then he got picked up a limo from his house. He had bought a jet or something, or a plane, and he flew.
He didn't. I tell you why I know he didn't, because he was on the helicopter that I was on, going into Wembley. I shared a helicopter with Kenny Jones. The helicopter was flown by a guy called Noel Edmonds, who was a TV personality over here, who owned a helicopter. And him and a bunch of other guys with helicopters were flying people in and out. Kenny may have got a jet from somewhere else, but I definitely sat on a helicopter with Kenny, and with.
No, he told me actually. He said he took a plane to a helicopter because he said he had bought a plane. He'd be making money, and he said there was a helicopter because he said it was so busy that was the way you guys could get in.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was amazing. And the thing that I think, everyone knows the stories, lots of famous people there, lots of great bands, everyone playing in the show. My abiding feeling is as we were flying over Wembley Stadium, I just saw all these people going in. It didn't feel like they were going in just to watch bands. They were going in full of empowerment because they had changed something. That the record they bought the Christmas before had flown in the face of what Margaret Thatcher had wanted. And ordinary human beings, ordinary working class and ordinary people had put their hands in their pockets and said, no, this is what we want, our money to go there. And so I think everyone was coming in. The audience were as much the stars as the people on stage. That's the way I see Live Aid.
Now, once Spandau breaks up, you had said you did The Craze, and then you were in The Bodyguard. What was it like? Kevin Costner was the biggest star, and Whitney and Kevin were the two. Whitney was one of the biggest music stars at the time. Kevin Costner was probably one of the biggest actors at the time, and Kevin Costner was one of those guys that all guys like. The women's love him, the guys like, and later he played all those movies. He played as a sports star. But how did you get that part? I know The Craze, and I saw The Craze. The Craze was great, but all of a sudden you're in a big. That's like summer blockbuster. How did that come about?
I had 4 auditions, Steve. 4 auditions. The first one to the casting director, the second one to the producer, the third one to the director, the fourth one to Kevin Costner. But the reason I was in LA was my wife, Sadie Frost, my wife at the time, had an audition for Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula to play Lucy next to Winona Ryder. She was playing Mina. And I said, well, let's go to LA and you can audition to him instead of doing a tape. And we went there. She gets the part, and then I'm hanging around in LA. And The Craze had quite an impact in America, especially in LA. That people had really the movie was getting played on cable, and actually Miramax were distributing it over there, and so I got myself an LA agent, and before I know it, I get these auditions for The Bodyguard, and he's I think I was the right person for that at the time, because being English, coming out of the music business, but also acting, and this is a character that's in the music business and is English. Well, they made it English anyway, at least, because they chose me, but I think it was going to be English. So, Cy Spector, although Cy Spector does not sound like an English name, but, it was a great role to do. It was an incredible experience in my life to spend 4 months on that movie set. With Whitney Houston. And Whitney was a really gorgeous, relaxed, every woman. She hung out with the crew. She ate at craft services. She cracked jokes. She sang in the trailer in the morning, gospel songs. She was really open and flexible to do retakes at any given time, and to take direction. She was amazing.
Now, Spandau eventually got back together. How did that happen?
Well, we went to court, right? There was a massive fight over the publishing. 3 of the band members wanted to. I wrote the songs, but they wanted to. We fought over who actually wrote the songs. Did they contribute enough that they should? And we all fell out over that. And I don't want to say I won, but I didn't lose. And that people were entrenched on their side, either side, and no one wanted to ever make up. So that would have been 2000. 10 years later, I've been looking after the catalogue and putting together live films and live albums and stuff like that. And then I just think, I really just don't want to go to my grave not talking to these guys. We had one of the greatest experiences that young people could ever have. That without each other, none of us would be here. None of us were unique enough to be solo stars in our own right, as big as we were within Spandau Ballet. So I started reaching out. I flew to Ibiza, where Steve Norman lived. I met him first. Then I met John. We started to gather steam. We wanted to do it. Tony still was holding back. And then one evening I met Tony sitting outside a pub in a place called Highgate, North London. And we both said our piece. He raised his glass, I raised mine, and we said, well, that's it. Let's not talk about it anymore. Let's try and make this happen. And it was a great feeling, actually. Yeah, it was really good to get back together and to do a big tour. And we did have a very successful time with it, and then we tried again in 2015, and I think we kind of get on and we don't get on at times, and but Tony really has now got himself a really serious solo career, and he wants to keep doing that. So 2015, I think we all got a little bit excited that we could carry this on even more, but then Tony jumped ship because that's what he wanted to go back to, and that's fine. At this age, we're all individuals. We don't owe each other anything.
Now, do you think will there ever be a reunion or a one-off?
Yeah,
what do you think?
I'd like to say there could be. I don't want to say no. I mean, again, I have the same reasons for wanting to get back on stage, because these were guys we have an immense amount of history with. Tony's out on his own solo, but he sings Spandau songs every night. So maybe one day he'll want to sing Spandau songs with the other guys from Spandau Ballet. I like playing with Nick. I mean, with Nick Mason, I play more guitar with Nick Mason than I ever do with Spandau. I sing lead with Nick Mason, but none of them are my songs. None of those songs made me the person that I am today. So Spandau songs did, and there's a whole lot of people out there that grew up with that music as their soundtrack and would like to stand in front of those artists again. Yeah, so I'm not going to say no. And if Tony fancies it, I'm sure we'll all get together.
Now, another thing on Instagram, I had to ask you this because you're at a soccer game and a Spandau song's playing. Tell me what that's about.
Yeah, so gold is a big, over here you don't really do it over there, but over here singing is a really big thing at football games, right? So you say soccer, I say football. It's the same sport, and it's a really big thing, and people sing, words about their team and about their players, and one of the songs that has really taken off in football circles with the crowds is Gold, and people often substitute a player's name. So there was a player that was playing for Arsenal called Zinchenko. He's actually a Ukrainian guy. And people went, Zinchenko, always believe in your soul. And then they'd sing in a very working class Cockney, you've got the power to know. Anyway, so I'm an Arsenal fan. I've been going to Arsenal since I was 9 years old. And to hear Arsenal fans at my football club singing a song that I wrote is the biggest thrill ever in my life. I mean, this is amazing. So I'm at Wembley Stadium. Arsenal are in a final for a trophy, and we win. And all the Arsenal fans are singing that song while I'm sitting there. They don't know who I am. They don't. They're pretty. Some of them don't even know who Spandau Ballet are. They're too young. And my little kid who's 15 is sitting next to me, and he puts his hood up, and you can see him in the Instagram just briefly, and he's embarrassed as hell. Christ, they're singing my dad's song.
Now, your podcast, Rockonteurs, is very with Guy Pratt, is very. It's great interviews because it's people. You guys are in the biz. What made you decide to do that? And what what makes it so good? I mean, you have great artists. It's because you've all shared a lot of the same experiences, but people love it. So, what made you decide to do a podcast?
Yeah, we were on our first tour bus with Nick, and we had an old video. We had a DVD of old Grey Whistle Test programs. Old Grey Whistle Test was a really serious music program that was over in the UK in the 70s and in the early 70s mostly. And it was, every major serious artist went on there and played live. And so we were watching these, and as we were watching the bands, we're talking about them. Edgar Winter or Alice Cooper or Chris Christopherson's on or Bowie's on. And Guy and I chatting about facts, and someone just said, you guys, why don't you get a podcast? And it was in the early days of podcasts, and when the lockdown happened, we then started to get people on. Like David Crosby came on, I think, on our third episode, who was terrified that he didn't think he'd ever get to play live again because of the lockdown. And it rolled, we got Mick Fleetwood on, we got Alice Cooper on, then John Bon Jovi, and then Noel Gallagher and Johnny Marr, because I think we're musicians. And I think the secret of our podcast is it's like having a AAA pass. It's if Guy obviously is the bass player with Pink Floyd and with Gilmour and with Nick and my best friend, and if Guy and I went to a gig and we went backstage, that's the conversation we would have, and you're getting to listen into that conversation. So there's no journalistic kind of feel to it, but it does take a lot of research. I'm not always talking to artists that I know everything about. So we do have to research it a lot. But I really enjoyed it. For me, as you know, Steve, it's a great pleasure to talk to people that you were your heroes as kids.
Oh, I'm fascinated. I've done over 1,030 episodes, and I sit there and some of these people, I go, holy crap, I can't believe I talked to them. So you've had this great life. You think about it, when you look back at your life, now at your age, what makes you proud? Like, what are a few things that make you proud about your life? Because people...
Well, you must be talking about career, right? Because
both. Career and life, because they both intertwine.
Without a doubt, it's having a marriage that's now been going for 25 years, having four, amazing boys who are now turning into gorgeous men. This is what we do. This is what I do on a daily basis. I'm still doing the school run. I've got a kid who's young enough. I'm still doing the school run. I've been doing the school run for 30 years. These are the things that make me proud, though, that they have I was in bed about, I know this is 2 years ago, and I'm reading another Beatles book, right? And I start to well up again, right? And my wife says, what are you reading? Because I've got tears in my eyes. I said, Paul has just met John, and if they hadn't have met, we wouldn't be living in this house. Because what they did was, make it possible for working class English kids to make music and become successful globally, and I achieved that. And so I'm proud of all of those things. If I'm talking about an individual thing I've done, I suppose, it is Band Aid, it is Live Aid. It's winning an Ivor Novello Award for my body of work. Songwriting is a songwriting award that's voted by your peers, other songwriters. So what makes me proud, I don't know, the ability to keep writing. I mean, knowing that I've still not written the best song I'm ever going to write. So still being able to do it, not drying up. So I don't know. Proud is a weird word. I don't know whether I'm I often feel like I'm an imposter.
How can you think that? How can you think you're an imposter? I mean, your music has touched so many people. Back when Spandau was touring, you probably had people who came with their kids, who came with their kids. I mean, I never understand, and I think we all, if you're creative, I always say being an artist or being creative, you're part narcissistic and you're part insecure, because we want that, but when we get it, we go, did I deserve that? So I mean, how can you think you're an imposter? How can you?
That's true. I just think because I judge myself on, I wish I'd done this. I wish I pushed myself that way. I wish that, these guys are so great. There are always people that you want to be, right? Or you think you could be as good as, and you can't believe you've muscled in the door, You're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. You are insecure, but there's also a lot of ego involved. No, I don't want to rest on my laurels, though. That's what I'm saying, Steve. I want to keep going. So I'm putting out new music.
And it's great new music. Right? And it's a great new album.
No matter how many people listen to it, even if it's just the neighbor and my dog, but you've got to try and get it communicate as an artist. I think what I write has really helped me as a human to see the world and to understand my own problems. And I'm hoping, as any artist does, that it affects other people and they get some solutions as well.
One more thing before we go. Give me a good. You're a very good storyteller. I can tell, and plus you have a podcast, so that's part of it. Give me a good 80s story that sticks out in your head. I mean, I know you probably have thousands of them, but I always it's like Mike Peters from The Alarm told me how he was at a bathroom and Joe Strummer was at the urinal next to him and someone else was, and he's just like, holy shit, he was a new musician. Give me one of those stories that people who listen will go, holy shit, that's a great 80s story.
Oh, I'm not sure what year it was. I think it's about 87. And we are in Ibiza, Spandau Ballet. And we are doing some kind of big TV extravaganza that's going to be outside. And we've arrived the day before. And we've been invited to Roman Polanski's house and for a party. And we're there. We're there with our manager, Steve Dagger, as well, who's a young guy. And someone comes running through saying, there's a telephone call for Steve Dagger, telephone call for Steve Dagger. No one's got mobiles in those days, right? So Steve goes, he's taken by this waiter over to where this telephone is, and he picks it up. And it's air traffic control of the Ibiza airport. Hello, is that Steve Dagger? He said, yeah, it's Steve Dagger. It's this air traffic control. We've just had a message from a plane that's coming in to land, and it's Duran Duran who are on board, and they said, are you going out? He said, we're out already. We're out. We're at Roman Polanski's house. Can you tell them just to get here? I mean, can you believe this is happening, right? So that's my story, Steve. I just thought, to imagine air traffic control is being bothered by Duran Duran asking Spandau Ballet if they're going out for a drink.
That's awesome, Gary. I want to thank you so much for coming back on. Are you happy with? Are you really happy with seeing that you have the imposter syndrome? Are you really happy about the new album? I mean, what's your feedback?
I'm very proud of the new album. Very proud of the new album. Yeah,
that's
Many people should. Thank you for having me on, Steve.
Anyway, so people go to GaryKemp.com. You can see it's a great website. Go follow and listen to his podcast, Rockonteurs. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find 1,032 episodes. If you're on YouTube, you can see my business show, The Coop Tank, where I talk to South Jersey and Philadelphia business people. I moderate a table for 3 people. And my new YouTube show, Coop's Comedy Corner. I bring in a lot of Emmy winners and comedic legends I'm friends with. So check it out. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only
Instagram as well for me, Steve.
Instagram, it's at Gary Kemp. Yeah, so check Gary out.
Gary J. At Gary J. Kemp.
Gary J. Kemp. So follow him and follow me. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time. Let me get